Hey guys, it's Miss McClellan, and today we're going to talk about the instability of French governments. So the revolution has started, and we're going to talk about some of the instability that it caused. First of all, when the revolution started, all of France's economic problems did not just go away. Yes, they had passed new laws like the August Decrees and the Declaration of the Rights of Man, but these money problems are not going to go away overnight. France is still very much in debt. They still don't really have a good way to collect taxes, and farmers are hoarding their grain, meaning they're holding on to it instead of selling it, so there's food shortages everywhere. Because people were running out of money, they developed this new thing called assignats. That's what we have here in the United States, where you have paper money instead of coins. The value of money dropped sharply, so money problems just increased. People didn't have enough money. The price of goods kept going up, and like I said, there were still food shortages. The situation actually improved for the middle class because they had the opportunity to buy land that the nobles and the church had to give up. But if you were a peasant or a member of the working class, money problems were still continuing to get worse and worse. People were still starving, still didn't have enough money. The situation just was not good. On top of money problems, you have wars happening. So, as you can imagine, monarchs, kings, and other countries, in particular in Austria and Prussia, were very, very angry that Louis XVI was in prison. They saw him as the rightful ruler of France. They felt like he shouldn't have been arrested, and they also felt like the ideas of the revolution that were being put forth in the Declaration of the Rights of Man, for example, threatened the peace in their own countries. They were scared that they were going to be overthrown too. People who were leaving, who had left France to go to Austria and Prussia because they were in favor of the monarchy, the more people that left, the more the revolutionaries got nervous. And so the National Assembly declared war on Austria in 1792. The guy in charge of the Austrian army, who was actually joined with the Prussian army, obviously decided to invade France, and with the hope of restoring Louis XVI to power. So the Third Estate, the National Assembly, declares war on Austria. Then Austria and Prussia combined invade France. And it wasn't a good thing because lots of the French army officers had been dismissed or had left the country, so France's army was very weak. They decided to issue a draft where people had to fight, and this helped them a little bit, and they actually won a battle at Valmy in September of 1792, but the dangers of foreign invasion were still there. The threat of foreign invasion was not over, and the wars were far from over. Radical groups continue to rise up. So you have economic instability, you have wars with Austria and Prussia, so the radical groups are just getting more and more power. They would accuse moderates of siding with the king, they would get suspicious of them and accuse them. A new constitution was introduced in 1791, and it created a new government. Instead of the National Assembly, now you have the Legislative Assembly. And this new constitution benefited the middle class, which made the radicals, the revolutionaries, even more angry, so they gained more and more influence. Violence and unrest still continued, and a couple of months after the Legislative Assembly was established, a new government came in. So if you're noticing a trend here, you can see that the governments that France was establishing were really unstable, and every few months you had a new one. So nobody really knew what the laws were, who was in charge. It was just very chaotic and unstable. Two of the most famous radical groups that we're going to learn about are the Girondins and the Jacobins. The Girondins were from the south of France, and their big thing was they said, the revolution is not just about Paris. This is the French Revolution. This has to do with all of France. And they were really angry that a lot of the revolutionaries were based in Paris, and they wanted to support the rights of the provinces, people living outside of Paris, to aid in the revolution. Eventually, the Girondins lost power and influence because they supported the idea of negotiating with the king. When King Louis left, they said, hey, we should still try to talk to him and, see if we can work something out. Well, the other revolutionary groups really disapproved of that, so they kind of lost power. The other group is the Jacobins, and this is the group that you're going to hear the most about. They were formed in Paris, but they later spread to the outer provinces, and they were all over France. They were at first pretty moderate, but later you're going to see they become very, very extreme, very radical. Both the Jacobins and the Girondins obviously hated the church and wanted to end the upper class privileges. The Jacobins and their leader, Maximilien Robespierre, eventually became the leaders of the revolution. They were the ones leading the charge, making all the decisions. They essentially were running France's government at one point. The Jacobins' main priorities, the first, they wanted the king dead. They said that they distrusted the monarchy and they felt that the king should be executed. They were also concerned with anyone who was sympathizing with the king. And so anyone who was even suspected of sympathizing with the king or was viewed as sort of an enemy of the revolution was terrorized, meaning they used violence, threats, things like that. The Jacobins were responsible for some progress in the Revolutionary Wars. The fight against Austria and Prussia went badly at first, but eventually the Jacobins helped to turn this around. It wasn't all the Jacobins. It was partially because the Austrian and Prussian armies eventually split, and so that kind of weakened them. But there was some progress being made for France in the Revolutionary Wars. And their last concern was obviously the economy. The problems increased rather than decreased after the outbreak of the revolution. It was almost impossible to obtain loans. There was just an absence of law and order about how money was to be spent. And the war was really expensive. So the economic situation, again, not improving, not getting any better. This is a picture of Maximilien Robespierre. He was the leader of the Jacobins. He was a lawyer, and he had been elected to represent the Third Estate in the Estates General. He was one of the first to be really strongly critical of the monarch and called for France to be a republic. So he had some of these ideas before everybody else did. Again, I said he's the leader of the Jacobins, and you'll see that he plays a big role in something called the Reign of Terror. So when the Jacobins took control, one of the first things they did was they established something called the Committee of Public Safety. And basically this committee had lots of power over military decisions, legal decisions, and it was dominated by the most radical of the Jacobins, and it was led by Maximilien Robespierre. It lasted from 1792 to 1794, and basically the Jacobins used this time period to consolidate their power, to gain more power. Some of the things they did, they set up a revolutionary tribunal in Paris. Basically anyone who was a suspect or considered to be an enemy of the revolution was put on trial, and if you were found guilty, often your head was chopped off by the guillotine, you were executed. And you had smaller local committees doing the same thing outside of Paris and provinces. In September of 1792, lots of prisoners in Paris were massacred. It was more than 1,000 people. And the Committee of Public Safety was responsible for this. And they said they did it because they suspected that the prisoners were conspiring to rise up and join a counter-revolutionary plot. But in reality, a lot of the prisoners were noblemen and clergy, and most were common criminals that didn't have anything to do with the revolution. They had just been arrested for, say, robbery or something. So they're using all these really, really violent tactics to get what they want, and really just what it's causing is mass chaos and instability in France. On September 21st, 1792, a pretty radical law was passed that abolished the monarchy, so it essentially made it illegal for France to have a king, and it declared France to be a republic. So France is officially has a system of government where leaders are elected to represent the people. The king was put on trial, and he was sent to the guillotine to get his head chopped off in January of 1793. And Marie Antoinette was sent 2 months later, or several months later. So she was also executed by guillotine. We will continue next time with more about the Reign of Terror. Please remember to not only take notes, like on the PowerPoint, but to write a 2-sentence summary and to come up with questions for class. Have a great day.